Welcome to Mooney Reads. My name is Beck, and it has been a minute since I've done a proper wrap-up. So today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read from August to October. The past few months have been not really the biggest reading months for me at all. I've been talking about it on here. I've moved, I'm getting settled in, getting reacclimated. And I have been working on reading a fair amount of things, not really finishing a whole lot. I've also been kind of watching more TV, which is good because I should probably know how to turn my brain off a little, and have been doing more crochet, and I might share some of that at the end. But first, I'm gonna go through some books. In August, I only read one book, and that was How We Get Free, which focuses on the Combahee River Collective, which was a Black lesbian feminist group in the 1960s and 70s. When most people think of second wave feminism, they either think of liberal feminists with Now, or they think of more radical feminists, lesbian separatism and stuff like that. But this is a Black socialist lesbian group that was really politically more, I would say, advanced than a lot of the more mainstream organizations. But they were able to really look across a number of different issues, including class, race, gender, and even sexuality. They were explicitly socialist. They worked with other Black groups. I don't know, there's a lot in here that's just really cool, and I think looking at them as an organization is really important historically, but also a lot of their insights are still extremely relevant today. This starts out with the original statement from the Combahee River Collective, and then goes into several interviews from some of the founders, as well as some more contemporary activists talking about the impact of the Combahee River Collective. So this was really excellent, and I definitely highly recommend it. Then I can move on to the books that I read in September, starting with The Principles of Communism by Fredrich Engles. This is super short. This is basically from my understanding, the bare bones of what would become the Communist Manifesto. So it's very short, very understandable. Good if you're interested in, I guess, seeing the history or trajectory of the Communist Manifesto. Also good if you want to know more, but would like something really simple. I think the Communist Manifesto is also really accessible, but this is shorter. But it was neat, and I'm glad that I read it. The next book that I read was A Million Quiet Revolutions by Robin Gao. This is a T for T young adult romance that focuses on two best friends who are secretly dating that are finding out at about the same time that they are trans. One of the main characters is super into history, primarily the Revolutionary War. So a lot of this kind of circles around that. In particular, they find the story of two soldiers in the Revolutionary War who might have been trans. They actually choose their names based off of it. In that vein, this says a whole lot about queer history, kind of what it is and how we can claim a stake in history, even when the people that recorded it would have excluded queer people from the narrative. This also says a whole lot about trans love, queer love in a really beautiful way. I also really loved how they talked about transness and different ways of being trans. It definitely goes against the idea that there is kind of one way to do it. So this was really beautiful. It definitely made me cry. I liked it so much that I went out and got myself a copy. In September, I also read Noodle and the No Bones Day, which is a cute kids book based on the TikTok famous pug. I don't really have a ton to say about it, but I read it. It was cute. And then the final book that I read in September was Unmasking Autism, Discovering the New Face of Neurodiversity by Devon Price. I read this for the Queer Weekend, as the author is a a trans person, and autistic himself. Devon Price is an autistic trans social psychologist who's looking at the experience of masked autistic people. In this, he walks you through what masking is, kind of how to identify it. This is really written more for autistic people who mask. So identifying the mask and also talking about the implications of masking. So the negative mental health ramifications, and so forth. And he draws from other people's experiences of being masked. He also digs into a lot of different social issues and talks about why certain people might mask. Particularly, a lot of masked people are those who go without a diagnosis or aren't diagnosed until adulthood. So he talks about the issues of sexism, racism, homophobia, and transphobia that kind of intersect with the autistic experience. I really loved this. I flew through this in like 3 days after, as you can see, not reading an awful lot. I highly recommend this, especially for autistic people. Even if you're not, I think that it can give a lot of good perspective in understanding that experience. In general, I'm really excited about this book because I have researched autism, especially autism in AFAB people and people who were later diagnosed for years now, and I have not come across anything this kind of comprehensive, especially not something traditionally published. Most of the stuff in general that I've run across have been like, you know, YouTube videos and TikToks. So this is really wonderful, and I'm super excited to read their other book. Then we can move on to the 2 books that I read in October. The first book that I finished was The Heartbreak Bakery by A.R. Capetta. I actually started this in September, finished it in October, and listened to it on audiobook. This is another T for T young adult book. The main character has just been broken up with and works at a bakery and ends up accidentally making brownies that make a bunch of other people break up. And throughout the course of the book, they try to get everyone back together. The thing that I really loved about this book was the way that it was able to explore relationships and breakups in particular in a super nuanced way. Certainly more nuanced than I've seen in most young adult books, but also more nuanced than how most adult books interact with it. And really, I think the majority of adults could learn something from thinking about relationships in this sort of nuanced way. So I really loved that aspect of the book. I also really liked how it was able to talk about gender. You get the main character's experience of gender and also their friend slash love interest who talks about theirs. On top of talking about experiences of gender, they also talk about, or show rather, different ways to go about not just using pronouns, but discussing pronouns, particularly when you're trying out pronouns or when there's somebody who uses multiple sets of pronouns. I think there were a lot of cool things that were done. Some of it was explicitly discussed, and some of it was just little details that seemed to really flow with the story, which I thought was really cool. There were parts of the plot that I didn't, I think, care about necessarily as much, that I wasn't as invested in as I could have been, but I still really loved the book, especially for what it was, in regards to these different, like, discussions that it had, and the way, the potential I think that it can have in reaching people, talking about some of these more complex issues. So it's definitely one that I would recommend. Then the other book that I read in October was Crystal Zodiac by Katie Huang. This is not one that I necessarily read from cover to cover. I did read the introduction, and then a lot of different entries. I went through, kind of looked at pieces of my chart, people I'm close to, things that would be relevant to theirs. There's more of it that I'm probably going to end up reading. I'm definitely going to go back to this book because I plan on kind of getting, hopefully, a little bit more into this, especially in the new year and stuff like that. I kind of like the approach that it has with each sign. It gives you a brief description of the sign, It also looks specifically at moon, sun, and rising, giving you kind of short description of the sign, a recommendation for a crystal that would be good, and kind of a ritual that you can do with it. It also gives you short descriptions of Venus, Mercury, and Mars in that sign, and like kind of within that description, kind of a one sentence bit on a ritual that you can do and some recommendations. And then there are 2 rituals at the end as well that I think is good, or the way that I'm interpreting it can be good if you are trying to tap in that part of your chart or just that kind of like energy or what have you. So that's been what I've finished. I've been working on starting and stopping a number of other books just because that's how it is right now. Just a lot of starting and stopping. I've had a lot of books that have been on my list that I kind of want to check out that just kind of haven't happened yet. But with everything that's been going on, it's been kind of hard to read. And I'm just trying to take it easy a little bit because it's been quite a while since I've done that. I'll probably continue to make some sort of TBRs just because making lists is fun for me. I'm actually in the process of making a couple of topical TBRs that I may chat about, just to chat about. I'm looking into books on cults as a part of one TBR. And I have quite a few books for that. This kind of started because I have been watching through Leah Remini's documentary on Scientology. And I saw that Mike Reamer, who's one of the co-hosts, recently came out with a memoir. So I got his memoir, I got her memoir. I've also been into like Fundy Fridays for a while. So I ended up getting several books on some Christian and Christian adjacent cults. I also plan on looking at some books that look at evangelicalism and the government in particular. I also have a few fiction books that are on there, like Sorrowland, so that should be a really interesting project. I've also been putting together a TBR with my partner Brent, looking at kind of Appalachia in the South, looking at social movements, movements for liberation, looking at like the labor movement and some of the civil rights movement. Some of them I've read, some of them they've read, a lot of them neither of us have read. So hopefully I'll be able to get through that too. So that's been a fun project and I'm excited to get to those too. The other main hobby that I've been kind of doing has been crocheting, which I've been doing as I've been listening to audiobooks and also watching TV and stuff like that. So I thought I would show off some of that. A lot of the first things that I made were small and, you know, either like small bits and ends or things that I, you know, long pieces that I crocheted and then turned into something for like stuffed animals or whatever. But I also got some coasters. This was the first round thing that I made that didn't turn into a ball, so I love that for me. The first really big project that I did and finished is this table runner that's Halloween themed. I'll maybe get some of it sitting on a table, like a picture or something like that, because you can't really see too well with this lighting. But we've got spiders, we've got skulls, we've got a pumpkin. It also comes with this, which was originally supposed to be a square for that, but it ended up being too big, so I just made him like an additional accessory, maybe like a catch-all or something. Another, I think, notable project. This is the first stuffed animal that I have made, the only stuffed animal thus far. But he's a little dinosaur, he's cute, maybe a little lopsided, but, and then I also made him a blanket because I was trying out, ribbing or whatever this is, so he got a blanket. Another notable thing I think is this, partly because I had to kind of wing this a little bit more. This white part was originally supposed to be square, but I ended up with an odd number of places to like stitch instead of even, so I turned it into a circle and then had to turn the rest into a square. So I think that's cool that I was still able to make it into something even though I messed it up. This is also the first hat that I made. It is kind of huge because I didn't, think about the fact that it would stretch. But it's still wearable. It's still cute. It's a nice color. And then the thing that I'm currently working on, I'm making a bunch of squares from this kind of rainbow yarn that I have. And in theory, I'm going to make enough to put them all together, probably into a cardigan. That's the current plan. So crocheting has been a lot of fun. I've got a couple other projects. I think I've actually got a blanket that I'm in the middle of making, not very far into making, so it's not really worth showing. But that's the other kind of hobby that I've been excited about. But that is all that I have for this video. Let me know what you've been reading, things that you've been interested in recently, in the comments, and thank you all so much for watching. Bye.